Hey, and welcome back. This is Jason Lee. I'm the host of Legacy Matters, and I am joined today again by Rusty Smith. We're in the third segment of our conversation today. In our first two segments, the first of which we discuss what EOS is. It's the EOS life, how to live the EOS life, and the impact it has on your business. Our second segment was talking about the value of getting yourself as a business owner or entrepreneur out of your business and what that really does to drive business value, and then also really kind of identifying where you need to be at in the business and how that can how coming to that conclusion can help you. Once you step away, that business is only going to become much more valuable, and you're going to get to enjoy life much more. And then that's where legacy comes from. It's not that you're stuck doing the day to day; you're actually able to get away. And then this segment, we're going to talk about probably the one of the bigger components, which is once you've decided, okay, I want to make change. You said earlier that your clients are oftentimes, what do they say, before you can be, break addiction or whatever, you got to realize you got a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before, most of your clients probably come to you because they realized, I got a problem. So now they've realized they got a problem. Now they realize they want to do something about the problem.
Or they can be better.
Or they can be better, right?
Mm-hmm.
They want to get better. Better way to say that. So they want to get better. Now they said, okay, now help me. Now you said, okay, now let's put these tools in place. Then you got to step back and say, now we got to look at the team, because none of this is happening without the team. So talk to us about that. Let's talk about where that all starts and what it's like when you get into that stage with a client of identifying right persons, right seats, and then do we going to keep those folks? Like, what does that look like for you?
Okay.
Rusty, your business owners.
So when we start an implementation, one of the first things we do is we build the structure, and we say, look, forget about who's in what role right now. We look at what the structure of the company needs to be, right? Every company, regardless of whether it's a manufacturing company, a distribution company, a retail company, a medical healthcare company, or whatever, every company has to get work in the door, has to get work out the door, and has to collect some money, right? Manage the assets of the business. And so we kind of start with that fundamental structure, right? Getting work in the door is usually sales and marketing, right? And that could be one person or two people or more, right? Operations, is making the product or delivering the service, and then managing the assets is finance and HR and accounting and all that sort of stuff, right? And so we say, let's forget about who we have in the organization right now. Let's build the right structure for your company 6-12 months in the future.
Okay.
Right. And then once we're clear that, yeah, this is the right structure, then we start mapping the people into those seats.
Okay.
Right. And two things start to happen, right? Three things start to happen. One, there's a great fit. That's the ideal situation, right? Sometimes we have right person, wrong seat, right? Which means we have someone that matches our values and is a great cultural fit, but they don't really fit the seat that we need them to fit.
Gotcha.
Right? And so we start to look at, is there something we can do to remedy that, right? And then the other one we have is right seat, wrong person.
Uh-oh.
Right? And this is where you have someone that's great at their job, but they just don't fit the culture. So I can give you a great example of that. I had one client who called me. It was Christmas Eve, and it was Christmas Eve of 2023.
Okay.
We're in 22, right? And I was at my family's in Alabama at the time, but he called me. He says, Rusty, I've got an issue. He says, our number one sales guy. He is great at what he does. He sells 60% of our product, right? He represents 60% of our revenue, but he doesn't fit our culture. He is just, a bull in a china shop. None of the other employees like him. He doesn't follow the processes and so on and so forth. And so I said, well, look, here's what needs to happen. That guy needs to go away. Now, he doesn't need to go away today. He doesn't need to go away this week, this quarter, right? He might not even need to go away this year, but ultimately 5 years from now, you don't want that guy in your company because he's not a good fit. And so it's been it was a year and a half, maybe even a year and 3/4, and finally they had reassigning accounts, and they had a process in place to get this person out of the organization without damaging the revenue, right? And so they started transferring accounts to other people. They any new accounts, he didn't get any of the new accounts, and so on and so forth. And it finally got to the point where he was out of the company.
And how's the company performing?
They're doing great. As a matter of fact, they just had their best their best month ever.
Did they see other people as they started to ease other responsibilities into other people? Did that fear of easing him out kind of dissipate when they saw other people perform better?
Of course, it wasn't publicly knowledge what they were doing.
Right.
And so it was something that the leadership team was working on. And doing, one of the things that we do with EOS is we set quarterly rocks, right? And so there's, certain things that we're going to say is, okay, by the end of this quarter, we want this account to be reassigned and so on and so forth. And so it took a while, right? But by having a plan to do it, actually made it successful.
Well, the crazy thing is I can only imagine how many, because I've experienced it firsthand and witnessed it firsthand, how many, when you don't have those things out on paper and accountable to, then one quarter goes by and another quarter goes by and a year goes by.
Yeah. And
and
you're
then
still
2
sitting
years
there with
go
the same problem.
and you're still sitting there with the same problem, and then you start to, and interestingly, I lived this when I used to have run sales organizations. You'd have that guy, and then and you're always afraid to let that guy go. And then what I found was it always seemed to work out.
Yeah.
And if somehow the culture, when people thrived in culture, then they performed better. It's like it got made up.
One of my clients had a great analogy for that. She said, once we got that person out of the organization, it's like this little black cloud just kind of drifted away that was covering the organization, and
and then everything starts to thrive.
So once you get that structure right and you map the people in, the next thing that you want to do is make sure that you're measuring the right things. And so ultimately you want to get to the point where everyone in the company has at least one number that they're being measured on. So everyone knows what they're being held accountable for.
Great.
All the members of the leadership team, usually the leadership team members have more than one measurable that they're responsible for. But as you start to push the process down to the organization, you want to get to a point where everybody in the organization has at least one number that they're being held accountable to, and that goes a long way in building that success.
Wonderful. Yeah. So kind of trying to play back because there was a lot of good information there. Want to capture a couple of those things, especially so people can think through some action items. When you're looking at this org chart and you're thinking about the players that you have on your team, and you've got culture being one of them, and we talked about that in the previous thing. Culture's probably got something that you got to iron out first and foremost. Is what are you going to be about, right? Do you have a process for helping them figure out what their culture is going to be?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So when we say right people, right seat, right people is the culture. Right people is the value. Right seat is making sure that and again, three things, right? They get the role, they understand. They number one, they're well suited for the role, right? If they're a detailed oriented person in a non-detailed role, that might not work. Or if they're a person who thinks bigger that is in a detailed role, that may not work. So they get it. They understand the importance of how their role fits into the overall organization, how you're going to achieve the goals that we've set. Number two, they have to want the role, right? And so they have to be willing to do what it takes to fulfill that role. So for instance, if you have a salesperson that needs to travel and he or she doesn't want to travel because of family commitments, that's a wanted issue, right? And then do they have the capacity? Do they have the intellect, the training, the experience, the time to do the job, right?
Right.
And so we look at that. We call it GWC. Do they get it? Do they want it? Do they have the capacity to do the role?
Okay.
Right?
So you're essentially an outside professional hired fractionally to come in and help them build this infrastructure. Let's say you got right culture, right? Or, I'm sorry, right person. Maybe they're quasi in the right seat, right? Maybe they're a well-crafted sales. Maybe they have the right skills for sales, but perhaps they're not just great at it. Or I come into a lot of organizations, and again, I don't think it's their fault. I think what happens is if a business owner doesn't know how to operate that part of the business, then they can think that person's good at their job, but they don't really know if they're efficient or inefficient. And so finance seems to be one of the biggest ones that I've witnessed. I walk into an organization uncover their numbers and get into their
Most
data and
business
realize.
owners don't start the business because they're great at finance.
Yeah, and so then the finance person they hired, they like if you don't know what you don't know,
Right.
then or back to sales, I could be like, yeah, he's a great sales guy, he's my leading salesperson. But then you hire an outside salesperson come in and go, that's an average salesperson. Let me, I had a guy the other day. I was talking to him about getting him supported in business opportunities, and his interpretation, because he'd never been in sales, he was coming from one sales job and he was exploring other sales jobs. And as I got him to uncover what his day looked like, I said, hold on. That's not sales, man. In a sales room, you would get destroyed. So I can't refer you into my friend's sales company because he would not be okay with that. We got to talk about your sales first. So what are your thoughts about fractional support? Like, do you guys, if you see this, and I guess my point is do you believe that part of this process would include hiring a fractional sales professional or a fractional to come in and help that sales professional get better, or maybe a fractional CFO to help teach you how to make sure that the CFO is doing their job right? Because it sounds like you can do right seat, right job, but maybe the skills, maybe it's not their fault the skill's not there.
Right.
Maybe it's just hasn't been part of the culture of development. Do you ever enlist the support of your partners to come in and support them in getting better?
A couple of examples there is that I'm gonna step back a minute to address something you said a few minutes ago. One of the saddest things that I see when I go into talk to a business owner and they proudly say, I can do every job in this business better than anybody else. Right? That's a company that's not going to be scalable. That's a company that's probably there's not going to grow, right? And so you want to hire people who are better at that job than you are.
Absolutely.
Right. Now, how do you manage them? How do you know if they're doing a good job or not? That's where the scorecard comes in. And we want to make sure that scorecard has forward-looking, predictive metrics on there, as opposed to having them all be, what was the revenue, what was the profit, and so on and so forth, right? So we want to say, hey, if we know that we need to get so many leads from our website, track it. Right? If we want to know what our conversion rate of those leads is into sales, track it, right? And so we want to start thinking about the things that are going to be predictive in terms of what the company is, put those on the scorecard, and then they're either going to hit them or they're not, right?
Okay.
And so if they start chronically not hitting those, then you have a couple of things to do, right? In terms of what you do about somebody that either is not fitting the culture or who doesn't GWC their seat, get it once, has the capacity, is we step back and say, okay, what needs to happen here, right? Sometimes the answer is that person doesn't belong in the organization. But most of the time, it may just be a coaching conversation to let them know what's expected. Oh, I didn't realize that, right? And they turn themselves around very quickly. Sometimes it's that there's another seat that's better suited for them within the organization.
Okay.
Sometimes you want to do training, right? There's an old adage in the HR world that would you rather train your people? Because a lot of people say, hey, we train our people and then they could just go work for our competitors. But would you rather train your people and have them leave, or not train them and have them stay, right? And so, we maybe some training can remedy the situation. Now, sometimes there's a role on the accountability chart. We call it an accountability chart, not an org chart, because it's really about what people are accountable for and what they're responsible for within the organization. If there is a hole, right, then that is where you would bring in a fractional person.
Gotcha.
So for instance, a big one is the finance area, right? Somebody has a great controller or maybe a great bookkeeper, hierarchy, bookkeeper, controller, CFO, right? But they're just not CFO material. But as a controller, they're mostly looking backwards. They're counting the beans, right?
Right.
Whereas a CFO, you want that person to be looking forward. And so, but maybe your company's not big enough or not ready for a full-time CFO. Yeah, so you bring in a fractional CFO, right? Same thing with a fractional sales manager. Okay, you've got 2 or 3 salespeople, and you need somebody to manage them other than the owner, who's probably not great at managing sales, right? Maybe a great salesperson, but may not be great at managing sales, right? That's where you might bring in a fractional sales manager or a fractional whatever, right? And so you look at the holes in the organization and you say, is this a situation where because there's also an affordability issue. You can't go out and hire a CFO and hire a VP of sales and hire a COO in a lot of companies, right? And so there might be a temporary fix, and that temporary might be several years where you do bring in a fractional.
Well, Rusty, I love the insights that you gave us today as we get ready to wrap up kind of the trilogy of our discussion. Any last parting words that you would give to a business owner regarding their legacy, EOS's impact, their people's impact, any of the stuff that we discussed in our conversation today? What would be your sign out? How would you sign out on this?
Well, and again, I'm biased, and I'm not here to sell EOS, right?
Yeah,
the companies that want to implement EOS, we're happy to help them. But I've personally seen how it's changed the lives of the companies I've worked for, and not just the owner, the members of the leadership team as well. Because we talk about vision, traction, and healthy, right? If you have the right vision and everybody understands that vision and how the company's going to get there, that's one piece of it. Traction is the accountability and discipline to actually make that vision happen. And healthy is getting the leadership team and then ultimately the rest of the organization working in a healthy, cohesive manner. That makes a fun place to go work, right?
Sounds like a great place.
If you got people in silos doing their thing, or even worse, you've got people that are at war with each other, different departments, sales hates operations and operations helps sales. That's not good, right? And so we want to get the team working in a healthy, cohesive way. And so I've seen it change lives. It's changed my life. I'm a single person business, but I use EOS in my business. I set my quarterly rocks. I have my own scorecard and so on and so forth. So it changes lives.
Okay, and then last question, and then we'll wrap up. When it's all said and done, when you look back at your life and what you've done, what would you say you want your legacy to be?
What I'm passionate about is teaching and helping others, right? There was a period before I got busy in my consulting life that I taught at the University of Houston in the entrepreneurship program. I love it when the students connect with me on LinkedIn and they've actually started their own business, right? That's the impact that I want to have, is to have a positive impact on the entrepreneurial world, and to make companies more successul.
Well, Rusty, I'll say this: it took me probably 4 years in business to finally cross paths with you. But I can honestly say that I'd heard you and of who you are and the impact that you were making long before that. Wow. So I had anxiously awaited the opportunity to cross paths with you and meet you and then befriend you. And now I think we're in, like I said, in a few groups together. And so I think you're hitting the nail on the head. You're well on your way to being able to say you've accomplished that.
Well, I would say likewise. It's great to be able to work with you as well.
Yeah, so we appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time. And again, Legacy Matters, we commit to your legacy, helping you establish that. So if you know or can think of anybody who's either living a life of legacy or could help others live a life of legacy, reach out to me and let's get them in a discussion. Appreciate it. Thank you.